Hi, everybody. I'm Kate Connelly, sitting in for Gail Gardner.
And I'm Dr. Lou Aronne. Welcome to Getting Healthy on the Television Food Network. This is the only national call-in show about health and nutrition, and we're glad you joined us.
We're here live for the next hour, and if you have any questions about our topic tonight, anything you want to know about your own health or your family's health, please give us a call.
Now, tonight we're talking about chronic intestinal problems that don't get talked about much in public, even though they affect millions of Americans. Diseases like ulcerative colitis and Crohn's disease. Our guest is Elaine Gottschall, a nutritional biochemist who believes that a certain type of diet can cure many people who suffer from these diseases.
Gottschall began studying these disorders after her own daughter became seriously ill, and she explains her diet therapy in a new book called Breaking the Vicious Cycle. We'll find out what she recommends in just a minute. But first, Lou, let's define the intestinal problems that we're talking about. Now, I've heard of these problems, but what are they?
Well, there are two main problems we're going to talk about tonight, Kate. One is ulcerative colitis, and the other is Crohn's disease. It's not really clear what causes these diseases. Nobody knows what causes them. Crohn's disease affects the entire colon. It can affect everywhere in the colon. It's usually more serious. It affects the entire wall of the colon and can cause perforations in the colon and the small intestine that go right into the abdomen and cause peritonitis. Ulcerative colitis, on the other hand, only affects the inner lining of the intestine, and it's usually more limited. They can begin very gradually, or they can come on very, very suddenly and be very aggressive. And some people have very mild cases that go on for years and don't bother them. Other people have very, very severe problems that require very strong medications. And in some cases, the colon and part of the intestine has to be removed.
Now, just for my information, the colon is the large intestine?
The colon is the large intestine. That's the very end of the intestine. And then the smaller intestine is where most of the nutrients are absorbed into the body.
Okay.
Now, these diseases present with a variety of symptoms. Usually abdominal pain, diarrhea, blood in the stool are the most common symptoms. People can have a loss of appetite, and they can begin losing weight. Usually people in their teens and 20s up to their 30s are diagnosed with these diseases, so it's a disease of younger people, and it tends to last for a very, very long time.
Is there treatment?
Well, there is treatment, but it tends to be on the severe side, and that's why the theory that Elaine Gottschall is going to tell us about tonight is very interesting. It's something that no one really knows whether these kinds of diets work in any given person, and there's a lot of information about it. We're going to discuss it. The treatments in very severe cases, removing the colon or part of the small intestine, but the other medications which seem to work, the least severe, are drugs that are sort of like aspirin, but they stay inside the intestine and have anti-inflammatory effects like aspirin, but inside the intestine. And it goes up to drugs that suppress immunity and prednisone and other steroids, which are very potent drugs with a lot of side effects.
Wow.
So if a diet can affect the disease, I think that people would want to know about it.
Now, is this, definitely, especially because this is fairly drastic, the worst case scenario is fairly drastic, and the treatment, do a lot of doctors recommend dietary work generally as part of the treatment, or is this a fairly new?
It's a very new concept. In fact, if you look at some of the material that we have that's from several years ago, it was provided by the Crohn's and Colitis Foundation, they say that diet plays no role. However, there are recent studies from this as far as the cause of the disease.
Right.
But as far as the treatment, it's elemental diets, which are diets that just have protein broken down into very elemental parts called amino acids, and other nutrients have been shown to help to quiet down the intestine. As far as the cause of the disease, some people feel that there are things like allergic reactions to certain bacterial products that causes this inflammation to occur. And there are some studies that have been published in the past 2 years that suggest that it's possible that that may be a cause. So certain types of yeast that gets into the colon has been shown to, antibodies to these yeast have been shown to be very present in very high levels in people with these diseases. The point is that we're not really sure what causes it. Research is progressing. It is possible that overgrowth of bacteria and yeast may cause some of the inflammation that goes on, but we still don't know exactly what's going on there.
Now, very quickly, before we go to the break, there's clearly, from listening to you, there's so much that isn't known about it. How many people do we estimate have the disease or have these sorts of problems?
Well, some estimates suggest that up to 2 million people
Wow.
have this. That's
Wow.
a large segment of the population. Some
Very
people may
large.
have such a mild case, they don't really recognize it.
Wow. Okay, well, we've got lots to talk about. We're going to take a break, and Lou and I will be back on Getting Healthy with our guest tonight, Elaine Gottschall, author of Breaking the Vicious Cycle. And you can call in with your questions. Our number here on Getting Healthy is 212-967-7397, and we'll be right back. Welcome back to Getting Healthy on the Television Food Network. I'm Kate Connelly, sitting in for Gail Gardner. And I'm here with my co-host this evening, Dr. Lou Aronne, an internist and director of the Comprehensive Weight Control Center at New York Hospital Cornell Medical Center. And our guest tonight, Elaine Gottschall, author of Breaking the Vicious Cycle, Intestinal Health Through Diet. Ms. Gottschall is a nutritional biochemist who has devised a dietary treatment for chronic intestinal disorders like Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis. And you can call in with your questions at 212-967-7397. Elaine, thank you so much for being with us tonight.
Thank you for inviting me.
Welcome.
Glad to be here.
First thing I wanted to ask you is, how did you get interested in this area, and how did you come up with the particular diet that you're recommending?
Well, 35, 40 years ago, our younger daughter was stricken almost overnight with what was diagnosed at New York Cornell Medical Center as incurable ulcerative colitis. The prednisone worked for a while. We were told at the time food had nothing to do with it. And when the prednisone did not work any longer, and the slazoparine, which was another drug that was they were using, was not controlling it, they were going to remove her colon and do a colectomy. And she would wear a bag, of course. She was only 4.5 years old. And we tried for 2.5 years to get answers. We phoned all over the world. Anyone who was doing research, my husband was on the phone with them. And we were finally led to 91st Street and Park Avenue to an old celiac specialist by the name of Dr. Sidney Valentine Haas. And he did all the right things, the blood tests, etc. And the second visit, he said, Mrs. Gottschall, what are you feeding her? And I said, well, Dr. Haas, she's barely eating, and what she eats, she throws up, or it comes out the other end real fast. And he said, we're going to change all that, and indeed he did. He made 3 basic changes, and within 3 weeks on this diet, the schizophrenic type of delirium that she was awakening with at night, 1 hour after she fell asleep, 4 times a week, it was horrible. That went never to return. My daughter is 43 and has 2 beautiful children, and there has never been a repetition. So there is some kind of an interesting connection between perhaps the toxins that are coming up to the brain. It took about 2.5 months before the ulcerative colitis symptoms cleared up, and we thought that she was all better, and she relapsed, which is very, very often the case with severe ulcerative colitis.
Very frequently relapse.
And it gives me an opportunity to say that you do what your doctor tells you. You stay on the diet if the doctor approves, because it's only good, nutritious food, and you hang in there, because if you have seen marked improvement in the first couple months, there is a tremendous chance.
So now, is this the type of diet that Dr. Haas recommended?
Absolutely. It was the original celiac diet. In fact, he went down in the annals of medicine as being the first physician in the world to cure celiac. So it was
celiac, just let me mention for the viewers who don't know, is a sensitivity to gluten, which is very common in wheat products. And a sensitivity to gluten can cause a change in the lining of the intestine and prevent absorption of nutrients. And this is an inflammatory process that's very much like ulcerative colitis and Crohn's disease in certain ways.
Well, there is some recent research that indicates that it's not just the gluten, that it's the combination of the starch and the gluten. And once you remove the gluten away from the starch granules, then the pancreatic digestive enzymes can get to the starch and break them down. So there are some reports coming through to show that Dr. Haas, who based his thesis on the idea that there was an overabundance of starch, and the thesis that was finally accepted a few months after his book came out, which was the gluten hypothesis, you can see where the two are fusing now, and there's truth to both of them. So I personally feel that the starch cannot be digested by these people with diarrhea conditions, and if you could take it away from them until they get better, then you can come back with it in small amounts later on.
All this information is so fascinating. I just want to ask you, did you start studying this before your daughter became ill or as a result of your
No.
daughter's illness?
Well, I was a Leave It to Beaver mother. You know? I was baking brownies for breakfast, and I was a secretary before I got married, and I had never been to university. But after she was on her way after the first year, and we were so sure she was growing like a weed, and she hadn't grown the 3 years we were trying to get her better, I went to Montclair State University and started as a nutrition major. And I spent 2 years. They were very nice, but I realized what I wanted was genetics, I wanted immunology, I wanted endocrinology, I wanted the whole shooting match, because this requires, I think, an understanding of the immunology, certainly. You mentioned that before. The immunology is very much involved with this in many interesting ways.
Tell us about the diet itself. What are you proposing in this diet?
Well, you can have all the fruits and vegetables other than corn, rice, potatoes, and other grains. You can have meat, you can have eggs, you can have dairy products, provided that the lactose has been removed. The one big problem that I had, of course, was what do you do for a sick child? How do you make cookies if you can't use grains? And you want life to be pleasant for people. And I had a friend from Austria who baked with hazelnuts, ground them up. And I called her up and got the recipe. It was very easy. It's easier to bake with these ground up pecans and almonds than it is to measure flour out. Nothing can go wrong. So you have to have a food processor because that makes life easy. And we now have a new bread recipe that someone from Oklahoma sent me, which is in this new book. And we can even make sandwiches now. We weren't able to slice the other bread very well. But we have everything. Now, what is interesting is that Crohn's patients are usually addicted to the very grain starch and sugar, the white sugar, which you cannot have in this diet. You use honey instead. Honey being molecularly a pre-digested sugar. Actually, it's like the sugars in the first elemental diet. You spoke of the elemental diet. Unfortunately, the elemental diet now does not have just ordinary glucose in it. They've put other things in it, even modified starch, which...
So we're talking about no grains at all. And no starches, no complex carbohydrates.
Yes, you do. You have legumes. You have lentils, split peas. You have beans. Why that starch is okay, that doesn't, I don't have the answers to that yet. It may be the fact that the grain starch has that gluten network. And, you know, there are proteins in barley, there are proteins in rye that are very much like gluten. And it may be just by the nature of grains that there is a protein starch complex. And I don't know that, though. The only work that had been done on grains was for wheat. But I am only speculating. I do know that the original diet that Dr. Haas gave us allowed the lentils and the beans and the split peas. So we use white beans a lot. We make pancakes out of them, which are quite delicious. And there are complex carbohydrates. There's squash, a lot of squash, and you know, butternut squash, acorn squash, just about every vegetable.
What about bread or pasta?
Well, you can't have that because it's made of grain.
Okay.
And Crohn's disease patients are addicted to it.
Oh, my.
They are addicted to it, the young ones especially. That's all they're eating practically.
Right, sure, of course. You mentioned before dairy products as long as there was no lactose.
Right.
How do you find that?
Well, first of all, we make yogurt ourselves. We make it ourselves. We use the bought yogurt to start off with as a starter, but we let it ferment for 24 hours, which gets rid of virtually all the lactose. You never get rid of every molecule, but you get rid of most of it. And as long as you follow the instructions, you can have that yogurt. You can make milkshakes, adding honey to it, bananas, all kinds of milkshakes. So these people are not without their calcium and without their good milk protein. You can have natural cheeses, because they have had a culture, a bacterial culture added in the aging process, even if it's only a year, which gets rid of all the residual lactose that is left there after you separate the whey, which contains the lactose, from the protein. So, but you cannot have cream cheese and cheeses that have not had a bacterial culture added to them. So there are reasons that I have figured out. When I went to the university...
What's the thinking behind this type of diet? Why is it that those particular things are not good? What is it in them?
Well, the reason I named the book The Vicious Cycle is that it is a cycle, and I don't know where it starts, nor does anybody else know where it starts. But once an individual develops a diarrhea condition, then the research is saying that part of the digestion of starch is impeded. In other words, there is injury even to the small intestine. If the colon is affected, even the small intestine cannot complete the digestion of starches. And the pancreas will take care of some of it. But you know, the final step in the digestion of starch happens at the mucosa, at the microvilli.
That's right.
And there is a
surface.
problem there. And there is one research report after another stating that in all these diseases, there is no action from those microvilli in breaking down the maltose and the isomaltose. So what happens is it goes down to the colon or to the bottom of the ileum, which is the lowest part of the small intestine where the bacterial growth is and the yeast are, and it feeds them because 85% of them must have carbohydrates.
Wow.
85% must have. So you have this vicious cycle where you're overfeeding them. You're giving a banquet because you can't break it down and absorb it. So down it goes, more bacteria, more toxins, more acids, and the thing
that
just goes
causes
on until you
inflammation.
intervene.
There's so much to learn about it. We want to get a chance to open up our phone lines. So we're going to take a break right now. We'll be right back after the break with Elaine Gottschall, the author of Breaking the Vicious Cycle. And we'll be taking your calls. Our number here on Getting Healthy is 212-967-7397. So give us a call. We'll be right back. Getting Healthy on the Television Food Network. I'm Kate Connelly, sitting in for Gail Gardner with my co-host, Dr. Lou Aronne. And our guest tonight, Elaine Gottschall, author of Breaking the Vicious Cycle. Ms. Gottschall is a nutritional biochemist who specializes in diet and intestinal problems. And we're taking your calls at 212-967-7397. And I believe our first phone caller, Robert from New Rochelle. Robert, are you there?
I certainly am, and thank you for a wonderful program on such an important topic. I'm a nutritionist, and I'm a big fan of Elaine Gottschall's. I've used her work in my practice, and I have to say that if someone can stick on her diet, someone with colitis or irritable bowel or any problem down there for a month, just give it a try. The results really are remarkable, and of course, as she says, it's nutritious food, and get your doctor's supervision, information, and all that. But Elaine, I'm just a big fan, and I'm not her agent.
Thanks a lot, Robert.
And I just had a question. Elaine, have you found any of the supplements like fish oils useful at all in kind of countering the inflammatory disease? There is some good research on them impeding things called leukotrienes that can foster inflammatory events.
Well, I know about leukotrienes. However, I really don't know if the fish oils are helpful because I haven't experimented with them. In other words, I did not use them when I was doing consulting for 7 years, and I do think these people should be under the care of a physician who understands the action of these things. I have no knowledge about the fish oils. As you well know, I do suggest that they use supplementation in moderate amounts because malabsorption prevents the nutrients from getting through, and they need to make up for that even as they get better. So I do think that vitamins and some minerals that you perhaps could suggest to them would be all right, but I don't know about the fish oil.
Okay, well, one more quick thing, if I may. I have a couple of clients that also have mouth sores. Do you find that at all connected, canker sores connected with bowel problems, or is that something independent? Or what do you think?
No, it's not independent because I personally feel that many cases of Crohn's disease are an overgrowth of yeast. And isn't the canker sore a characteristic of some forms of thrush? I mean, isn't there a connection there? Because thrush is a yeast infection of the mouth. So there is a connection there. That's about all I know about it.
Right. Usually canker sore, there are certain types of sores in the mouth that are caused by a viral infection, but they wouldn't really be associated with thrush. But it's very often that people who have sores and inflammation from Crohn's disease have mouth ulcers as well. There is that association.
Well, to get back to Robert's question, it seems like many systems of the body are affected when you're not absorbing food and you have what they call a dysbiosis or an imbalance in the intestinal flora. You know, the brain is affected many times, the thyroid is affected. Why wouldn't the mucous membrane of the mouth be affected in some people?
Mm-hmm. That's right, Lou. We were talking before the show, and I asked you if these problems tended to be caused by bacteria that we already have in our bodies, and that what you're talking about would seem to support that. You said that often they are.
Right. Well, it's still a very controversial point, but some people have isolated antibodies to different forms of yeast and to bacteria that do exist in the colon, and some people believe that it's bacteria that get into the colon from foreign travel. It's very hard to pinpoint these things because the bacteria and yeast that are in the colon change so much. But I'd say that if there's a disease where there's some evidence it's in diseases of the bowel, that sort of an allergic or inflammatory response to yeast has been shown to have some effect on the body.
There's work
Wow.
coming through from the arthritic specialist, Dr. Aronne in England, that indicates that there is, that ulcerative colitis especially is an autoimmune immune reaction as a result of all these antibodies being produced against the overgrowth of a mutated bacteria, maybe from antibiotic therapy.
Right.
And the antibodies in the body are produced to fight this overgrowth, and by some fluke, the person's genetic makeup is such that the cells of their intestine have the same markers on as these bacteria. And he calls it molecular mimicry, where the antibodies are actually attacking your own cells. So that work is being done in many laboratories, and it's called molecular mimicry.
It's
Well,
just
it's
like
good
rheumatic
that-
fever.
Right, exactly.
At least they're working on it. And we want to go ahead and get back to the phone because there's so many people who want to talk
Good.
to you, Elaine. Our next call is Mike from Jersey City with a question about his mother. Mike, you want to speak to Elaine and Dr. Lou?
Hi, yes. I'd like to thank you for having such a good show on. Also, it's very informative for us. The first question for Dr. Lou. My mother's been diagnosed with Crohn's disease, but like you had said earlier, she doesn't get the correct information concerning a diet. Is there a way, or can you tell me somehow that I could convince her that the proper diet would be beneficial for her?
Well, it's very tough, Mike, because I think that this is a field that's in evolution. If you read the material that's printed, it says that there's no connection in the cause and effect. In other words, diet doesn't cause it. But the fact is that more recent research suggests that at least in some people, there may be a relationship. So if you look at any of the standard books, I would say that they would say that it's not there, and it would be hard to convince your mother based on that. And I think that you have to have her see someone who's up on this field, who's really involved, the way Elaine did by taking her daughter to somebody who was really on the forefront of the field back 30 years ago. It's still a forefront, and it's amazing how hard it is to study these problems. That's, I think, the problem that many doctors have, is that we can't get evidence that these things work because it's so hard to prove that they actually do work. What would you suggest, Elaine? How would Mike convince his mother that this is important?
You know, some people, and rightfully so, will listen to the doctor, and that's the way it is. You can tell your mother that we are at the forefront. In October, I will speak to a group of gastroenterologists in Montreal. They are going to offer my book to their members, and I am asked to speak. So if she wants to beat them to the punch and start on the diet now, I have a feeling that things are going to be changing soon. At least this is my hope.
Right. I would also say that in the short run, that for a month or 2 months, an approach like this would not hurt. I can't imagine it would hurt anybody to try something like this for 1 or 2 months, and if it worked, it would be fairly obvious in that person if it were working. So I take it and say, you know, give it a try. If it works, great. If it doesn't work, then you're back to square one, and you've at least tried it, and you may be ahead of the game. You certainly won't be behind the game in the short run. So.
Right, good advice. Okay, our number here at Getting Healthy is 212-967-7397. We're going to take a break, and we'll be back with our guest tonight, Elaine Gottschall, the author of Breaking the Vicious Cycle. And it is time now for our nightly quiz question. We'll be back with the answer and take more of your calls at 212-967-7397. Stay with us. Welcome back to Getting Healthy on the Television Food Network. I'm Kate Connelly, sitting in tonight for Gail Gardner. With me, my co-host, Dr. Lou Aronne, who is the director of the Comprehensive Weight Control Center at New York Hospital, Cornell Medical Center, and our guest tonight, Elaine Gottschall, author of Breaking the Vicious Cycle, Intestinal Health Through Diet. Ms. Gottschall is a nutritional biochemist who's devised a diet therapy for chronic intestinal disorders like Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis. And we invite you to call in with your questions or comments. The number is 212-967-7397. But first, let's answer the quiz question, which is true or false? Butter contains lactose and margarine does not. Okay? Guys, what's the answer?
Well, actually, butter does not contain lactose. If it does, it does not contain lactose
doesn't.
because it is it's just the fat from the milk.
Okay.
But you have a technological process involved in making margarine,
Mhm.
and it so happens that the formulation requires milk solids most of the time. There may be margarine companies that are discontinuing the use of that with all this lactose intolerance.
Right.
But in the most part, margarine has milk solids added, which are protein and lactose. So in fact, margarine does contain lactose in most cases. And in my book, I tell them to use their butter and not to use the margarine.
Just when you thought you knew
Knew
a
it
thing
all.
or two. Well, not at all, but a thing or two. Okay, we have a lot of phone calls. Let's take our first one. Tim in Holyoke, Mass. You want to speak to Elaine and Dr. Lou?
Yes, hi. I've got a question concerning my diet for the past 16 years, which has been highly restricted. I basically lived on lean meat and twice baked potatoes with no fruit or no dairy products and foods that are extremely low in acid, if any. And I'm wondering if the way to treat the situation is with introducing artificial enzymes or actually maybe finding out what the cause is and treating it that way.
Tim, what kind of problem do you have?
Well, the problem basically is diarrhea for the last 16 years. If I eat something that's not on my very short list of foods, it'll go right through me. The people at the Leahy Clinic called it rapid transit of food through the bowel. And it's basically, schedule is extremely important too. I really have to eat on time and go to sleep on time.
So there's no inflammation in the intestine at all, as far as you know?
Well, how would I know if there was an inflammation?
Well, they would have told you if they looked in there, they would have seen some inflammatory process.
Well, what they actually did was they went in and snipped a piece of the intestine out and found that my liver and pancreas were not basically producing the chemicals to do enzymes, basically.
So you have not enough of the enzymes.
Right.
That's not exactly what we're talking about, but the answer is if you're not producing enough of the pancreatic enzymes, those can be replaced, and those will definitely help you to digest the food. Now, whether or not the food and the diet you're on is the best one for you is usually trial and error when it comes to this.
Exactly,
So in your case, it sounds like you may have what's called pancreatic insufficiency, and you would want to take pancreatic enzymes to supplement your the normal production, which is less than what you need, and that very well should help you to have normal digestion. So that's what I'd recommend.
All right. I'll give it a try.
Okay.
Thank you.
Can you get pancreatic enzyme? I mean, is that something a doctor would prescribe for you?
Oh, yeah.
You would just take
Come
it
in
orally?
capsules. Usually you need to take quite a bit of them. You may need to take 8 or 10 capsules a day, and you take them before each meal, but the enzymes are encapsulated just like taking a pill before a meal.
So they're out there and you can just talk to your doctor about it.
That's right. Very few people need this. It's a very specific diagnosis, and he's going to a very good place, the Leahy Clinic.
Right.
They would know what's going on and would be able to prescribe this for him.
Can I just say one thing to
Sure.
Tim? You may not want to hear this, Tim, because you've eliminated so many foods, but I would suggest that just for a few days that you cut out the potatoes and substitute your acorn or butternut squash and see what happens, because potatoes are not permitted on this diet. And very often people tell me they have gone on diets such as yours with very little relief, and when they've given up potatoes, things have changed. I know you hate to hear that, but try it just for a couple days.
And the others are good foods, too. Okay, let's go on to our next caller. We have Wallace in Philadelphia. Wallace, you want to speak to our experts?
Yes, thank you very much for such a good program. I've had Crohn's disease.
Welcome back to Getting Healthy on the Television Food Network. I'm Kate Connelly, sitting in for Gail Gardner. Here with me, my co-host, Dr. Lou Aronne, and our guest tonight, Elaine Gottschall, author of Breaking the Vicious Cycle. And we're taking your calls and questions at 212-967-7397, and we're going to go right to our first call. Barbara in Pawling, New York. She's a nutritionist. Barbara, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Hi, Barbara.
I have a question for Elaine. I've had ulcerative Crohn's for 9 years. I've been hospitalized 3 times. And each time, the hospital dietitian has come to speak with me and always recommends a low-bulk diet, with then implementing back or trying to get back other foods into my diet to see how my system handles it. And basically, you're talking about eating vegetables and beans, and that's all I've been told I should stay away from.
Well, the term bulk is a little ambiguous to me. Most of the time I've heard the terminology low residue. And many people think low residue diet is the same as low fiber, when in fact it is not. A low residue diet is one that does not produce a lot of bacteria, because you know most of the stool is bacteria. About 50 to 60% of normal stool is bacteria. A low bulk diet it leaves me a little stymied. I think you mean low fiber. Is that what she's told you to do? And I do believe at the beginning of the diet, my diet, and I tell you in the book, to peel things, sometimes put them through a strainer. Yes, at the beginning of the diet, a low fiber diet or a low bulk, if it's the same thing, would be appropriate. Then as you start getting better following the diet, then you can add some of these other things. You're not adding starch, which is, and the wrong sugars like lactose and sucrose, and those things are just gobbled up by bacteria, and they multiply like crazy. So you're cutting out so much of what is causing overgrowth of bacteria and yeast that you can have some fiber as you get better, and that's why the vegetables are permitted. But at the beginning, she's right. Low fiber, yes.
Now, that's something interesting, sort of made a little bit clear to me. The sugars and the starches actually, they cause the bacteria to grow more, or more of it to grow, I should say?
Well, some of the bacteria and some of the yeast can actually break apart the starch, which leaves sugars.
Mm-hmm.
And it leaves sugars that are what we call disaccharide sugars. They're double. And they cannot be absorbed through our small intestine in that form because you've got this injured intestinal surface. What's causing it, we don't know, but you are sick and you have an injured mucosa, what they call an injured mucosa. So when these double sugars, which cannot be broken by your intestinal tract and cannot be absorbed as a result, go down to the lower part of the gut where most of the bacterial and yeast growth is, they can break it. And they get energy from these sugars, and that gives them the energy to multiply. But you see, they're not very efficient energy producers. And they leave things like alcohol, actually. They leave molecules, lactic acid, butyric acid, acetic acid, which have been shown to be irritating. And in fact, the lactic acid, the kind they produce, has been shown to be probably the source of some of the bizarre behavior that accompanies some of these gastrointestinal problems.
We've heard a lot about that. This is so dramatic no matter which way you turn. But before we run out of time, thank you for answering my question. We want to take our last question from a caller tonight, and that's Karen in Hillsborough, New Jersey, who has read your book, I understand. Karen, are you there?
Yes, hi.
Hi.
Hi, Dr. Gottschall. This is Karen Baylock, and my question is, and first comment is, my husband was on your diet. We've been using it for the last month. He's doing great. Not only controlled the colitis, but also the hypertension. He does not need any more medication for his hypertension. My two questions are dry curd cottage cheese. You mentioned it on a radio show today that it's pot cheese. What old-fashioned pot cheese? I have no idea what that is, and where can I get it?
Well,
secondly, real quick, last question is, what do you think about lactose-free products available in food markets?
okay, first of all, the dry pot cheese. We were having a lot of trouble in New York City until someone just called me about a month ago. Murray's Deli down at 20th, and down in, look it up in the telephone book, Murray's Deli has it. And I've been told that other Jewish delicatessens have this dry curd cottage cheese. Do not be fooled by the label. It's got to be dry. It cannot be moist like the ordinary cottage cheese that you buy. It's being mislabeled. The labels are really useless. Please don't pay any attention to them. If the store has, getting to your second question, the lactose-free products that you see in the store, I would prefer that you did not use them and follow exactly what is in my book.
Okay.
I've become very skeptical of labeling.
Right.
Okay.
As we all are. You got to be so careful.
Right.
We've only got a few seconds left, so we want to thank you very much, Elaine, for being here. And
Thanks for coming.
And Lou and I are going to be back in just a few moments. We're gonna show Elaine's book, I believe, and there's a phone number as we go to commercial if you've got further questions. And then Lou and I will be back.